Urgent chaos on the front lines. Elon Musk has triggered a bloodbath within the ranks of the Russian army immediately after restrictions were imposed on the use of Starlinks. Now, Russians are firing on their own troops. A 12-man assault group was destroyed by friendly fire in the Zaporizhzhia direction. This was reported by partisans from the Atesh movement. According to their information, there is a complete communications collapse within enemy units. Starlink is failing and enemy signalmen are panicking. Backup channels are down and their own EW systems are jamming their radios. Coordination is collapsing, chaos is growing, and losses mount from strikes and internal disorder. The Ukrainian military is exploiting this, quickly pushing the enemy back. The first results of their advance are already known. According to Ukrainian media, they have managed to achieve success around the Kupiansk agglomeration and in the Lyman direction. At the same time, on many fronts, Russian assault operations have effectively come to a halt. A building housing Putin's propagandists is on fire in Moscow. A fire of unprecedented scale broke out in the building where Russian media operate. The fire engulfed the area where the editorial offices are located. Izvestia, Ren TV, and others were evacuated as smoke spread through the floors. Meanwhile, Canada is sending AIM air defense munitions to Ukraine, which the Ministry of Defense says will significantly strengthen their ability to intercept cruise missiles. A fateful decision was made during a meeting between Mikhailo Fedorov and his foreign counterpart, during which they also discussed an agreement to support drone production. There will be more combat drones thanks to cooperation between Ukraine and Poland. Kyiv and Warsaw have signed a letter of intent for joint production in the defense industry sector. Thus, Ukraine and Poland are preparing to jointly produce drones and other weaponry, utilizing Ukraine's experience in modern warfare. This is what the world is talking about today. Don't miss what's coming up next. Trump took his revenge to the fullest. Tomahawks launched at Moscow. Shock, a bloody purge. Transnistria, the Crimean bridge in pieces. The Ukrainian armed forces underwater monster is on the hunt. A sensation has come out of the US Senate. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham has delivered a strong blow to the Kremlin. Putin needs to be pressured even harder. The senator called on President Donald Trump to initiate the process of transferring to Ukraine Tomahawk missiles capable of turning the tide of the war.
After yesterday's massive attack, I urge President Trump to begin the process of supplying Ukraine with Tomahawk missiles, which will change the situation militarily. In the coming days and weeks, we must increase the pressure on Putin. Any negotiations that are perceived as excessive rewards for aggression will lead to disasters around the world.
Graham stated firmly that the current US pressure on Putin to bring him to the negotiating table and stop the massive strikes on Ukraine is not working. He emphasized that Trump's idea to strike at the buyers of Putin's oil, which feeds the Kremlin's war machine, must be implemented urgently and strictly by the US and Europe. According to Graham, Trump has already dealt a powerful blow to Putin's economy by starting to go after oil companies and refineries.
Tariffs for India. A good example of how things can change. India is now buying significantly less Russian oil. And if other major buyers follow its example, it will help put an end to this bloody carnage.
It was previously reported that a decision is being prepared behind the scenes, one that could turn the rules of the game upside down right in the midst of the negotiation process.
Washington is pushing for the provision of Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine in order to create a strategic leverage in the negotiations.
Former advisor to the Commander-in-Chief of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, Dan Rice, held talks with U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth regarding this initiative. We're talking about the use of missiles with a range of up to 4,000 kilometers, which could radically change the balance of power. The deep rear of Russia becomes vulnerable and the Kremlin finds itself under serious pressure, forced to seek concessions.
In November 2023, Ukraine launched ATACMS missiles for the first time and destroyed 24 Russian attack helicopters, Ka-52s. Moscow immediately withdrew all its helicopters from Crimea and revised its combat plans. A few Tomahawk missiles will do the same. The range is so great that Russia simply cannot protect all of its critical assets.
But that's not all. Something even more shocking has come to light. The American response to Ukraine's need for long-range weapons is becoming a reality. Not just with Tomahawks alone. The US secretly conducted combat tests of the Rusty Dagger cruise missile for Ukraine, developed under the ERAM program. This was reported by Defense Express. So, the new cruise missile, which is being developed specifically for the Ukrainian armed forces, has successfully passed the stage of testing with a live warhead. This weapon promises to change the rules of the game thanks to its 400-kilometer range and record low cost. The test took place at a training ground at an airbase in the southern United States. The base's press service noted that the testing made it possible to gather critically important data for further development. An economically efficient and long-range strike system, which is being developed under an accelerated program. And at the same time, the missiles are already flying towards the Russians, a hellish retribution for the strikes on Kyiv. Belgorod is under rocket fire. The city and its surroundings have been plunged into darkness. No electricity, no water. Locals are also reporting communication outages. The region is shaking after a powerful attack.
She says that everything else has been plunged into darkness as well. Dubovoye, accordingly, is also completely affected. So they just turned it off.
The governor of Belgorod region, Gladkov, in a panic, declared a catastrophe. He claimed that the Ukrainian armed forces had delivered a devastating massive strike on Belgorod and its surroundings. The region's power system has been reduced to ruins. 9 municipalities were immediately plunged into darkness. Putin's defenses have been torn to shreds. Energetic paralysis has gripped Stary Oskol. Power failed during the explosions. Emergency teams are preparing the population for the worst. If this persists, people will go to heating centers and water will be delivered. As if out of the blue, Russia is spectacularly losing its last trump cards and spheres of influence. The head of Ukraine's foreign ministry, Andriy Sybiha, literally blew up the information space with his statement on Moldova. The hour of reckoning is near. The presence of occupiers in Transnistria has been recognized as a critical threat that must be eliminated. Kyiv has officially confirmed that Ukraine is ready to consider Chisinau's request and make a decisive contribution to the security of its neighbors. The hint is clear. Transnistria is holding its breath, awaiting the finale.
I think it's becoming increasingly obvious. The threat posed by the continued presence of Russian troops on the territory of Transnistria, and therefore the necessity of restoring Moldova's territorial integrity based on international law. According to
the minister, Ukraine is already striking at Russian influence in the region, cutting off all levers of pressure.
We are already helping through the development of joint border infrastructure, through Moldova's independence from Russian energy resources, and through joint cooperation on the path to EU membership. And it is very important that this should be a joint movement.
When asked directly about a military scenario, Sybiga responded firmly, "It is Chisinau's right to decide how exactly to clear its own land." Ukraine welcomes the new plan to eliminate the separatist enclave and is ready to respond to any request from Moldova for practical cooperation. In other words, if Moldova asks for help, Kyiv's response will be swift.
We are ready to help our Moldovan friends, but we must focus specifically on our own track. Although I share the opinion that, in reality, the security of Ukraine and Moldova is indivisible. That is why I am glad to see that the Moldovan side clearly understands the role and significance of Ukraine in regional security.
Sybiga also touched on Belarus. The minister stated that Kyiv is moving towards a direct alliance with the democratic forces of Belarus. To coordinate this process, Ukraine is bringing in heavy artillery, a special representative who will serve as a liaison between Kyiv and the Belarusian resistance. The minister made it clear, the bridges have been burned and Ukraine will no longer take the potato dictator into account. The importance of this step is off the charts. Sybiha recalled that in his historic speech in Vilnius, Volodymyr Zelensky devoted almost a third of his time specifically to the Belarusian issue.
We believe that the time will come when Belarus, a democratic Belarus, will become the fourth member of the Lublin Triangle.
But as for Moldova, signals about the start of such actions by Moldova have been coming for quite some time. It has become known that Chisinau is preparing a strategic plan for the return of Transnistria. The country with the EU and US is planning regional reintegration but keeping it confidential. The reintegration deputy PM stated this, noting that details will be released later.
We are indeed actively working on a strategy or roadmap for reintegration. But as you know, sensitive issues require caution. We need to carefully consider steps that will yield results over time. We cannot disclose every step in real time because that could be harmful.
Ukraine has also hinted to Moldova about the return of Transnistria. For example, the head of the presidential office, Kirilo Budanov, hinted that Ukraine has enough military power to decisively resolve the Transnistrian issue. But the matter is not about the army, it's about broader geopolitics. Despite the victory of pro-European forces in Moldova, Transnistria remains a stronghold of Russian influence, which Moscow has maintained for over 30 years. But then came the key point. For Ukraine, this Russian garrison is a threat that the armed forces of Ukraine are fully capable of eliminating.
We can resolve this issue if we decide to take it on. Resolve it radically. But is it necessary to do so? This is where geopolitical questions begin.
A deadly blow for the Crimean bridge. The underwater monster Morychka has been unveiled, which will send Putin's pride to the bottom. Ukrainian engineers have officially revealed a weapon of retribution that has caused hysteria among the occupiers in Sevastopol. The tests are complete and the specifications are shocking. This silent predator is capable of covering 1,000 kilometers with a colossal charge weighing over a ton.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
The device's maximum speed is about 10 kilometers per hour. Thanks to inertial navigation, Morychka heads toward its target in complete radio silence. It can't be seen by radar, can't be heard by sonar, and no electronic warfare system can detect it. Morychka possesses a unique ability. It can freeze at any point and remain in standby mode for days or even weeks, to be continued. At the right moment, the drone awakens on command and delivers a fatal strike. The power of the explosion is adjusted to match the target. Bridges, military ports, and the largest ships of the occupiers are now in the zone of deadly risk. The developers have confirmed that all systems are working perfectly. Morychka is fully ready for real combat deployment. Time is now counted in minutes.
It will approach the Crimean bridge very quietly and unnoticed. It can stop at a point. It can remain undetected for some time and then at any moment move on to strike its target. The payload is about 1,000 kilograms. You can load all sorts of interesting things onto it. It's a kamikaze, designed to strike very large targets, such as port infrastructure, large bridges, and ships. We work with the military to understand which targets need to be hit, and we modify it for those specific targets.
The occupiers' knees start to shake at the mere thought of a strike on the Crimean bridge. Recently, powerful explosions rocked Sevastopol, which is occupied by the Russians. The Russians immediately closed the Crimean bridge. For more than 7 hours, the occupation authorities in Crimea declared an air raid alert only after the explosions. According to public sources, this could indicate a strike by the Air Force on Russian air defense facilities. And it won't just be tough for the Russians in Crimea. It has happened. Fedorov is ramping up the weapons flywheel for Ukraine to the maximum. The new agreements have already made Moscow nervous. Stockholm is handing Ukraine an iron fist of air defense, powerful radars, and deadly electronic warfare systems. This is not just assistance, it's a technological knockout for the aggressor, one that will forever change the rules of the game on the front lines. The new aid was announced by Ukraine's Minister of Defense, Mikhailo Fedorov, during a conversation with Sweden's Minister of Defense, Paul Jonsson. The sky is locked down, Saab's long-range killer drones are already on their way. Sweden is rolling out its best military trump cards. Stealth radars, communication jamming systems, and drones capable of striking the enemy deep behind their lines. Fedorov is putting a strong emphasis on destroying ballistic missiles. Now Putin's Iskanders will be turned into scrap metal even before they reach their target.
Ukraine and Sweden are working on additional contributions to the Paul initiative to provide Ukrainian soldiers with critically important weaponry, particularly means to counter ballistic missiles. And
Another innovative breakthrough. The Brave One cluster is discussing the possibility of launching a joint Brave Sweden program. The co-financing format opens the floodgates for millions in grant funding, and the latest defense solutions will be bypass field testing by fire, destroying the enemy at the front. This is sensational. Ukraine and Sweden are launching joint production of giants. On the table are deliveries of the legendary Gripen fighter jets and the ultra-powerful Meteor missiles. The goal is simple: to reach and neutralize the carriers of glide bombs before they have a chance to drop their payload. Meanwhile, a tough pact with NATO has been forged, priorities have been set, and Putin should prepare himself. Ukraine and the alliance have reached the peak of cooperation. Mikhailo Fedorov and top NATO generals have signed the death warrant for Russian aviation. This is about total domination. The Patriot, F-16 and HIMARS are getting a new boost, and the unique combat experience of the Ukrainian armed forces is now setting the trend in NATO headquarters.
the parties have agreed on the key priorities for cooperation. These include strengthening air defense, developing the Patriot, F-16, and HIMARS systems, as well as joint work on technological superiority. Ukraine is sharing its unique combat experience with its partners. Real battlefield data and technological solutions, which are already in use.
Sensational news, Crimea is falling apart at the seams, Russians are fleeing the peninsula in panic, and the so-called Crimean waiters are in hysteria, a cry of despair from under occupation. Why is Crimea increasingly looking forward to Ukraine's return? And why are the occupiers already hastily packing their bags? Watch the whole truth right now.
Construction, traffic jams, filth. That's what Russia brought to the Ukrainian peninsula of Crimea along with annexation. Local wheeler dealers and Russian officials started grabbing up the land of local resorts, depriving Crimeans of their property and green spaces. Naturally, no one cares how skyscrapers and entire neighborhoods of new residential complexes will fit into the existing infrastructure.
The new residential buildings are steadily going up. However, the one major thing that I really don't like is that they are building everything without including a local kindergarten or a primary school. That's a real problem. Our leadership in Crimea, including Simferopol, is aware of this, that they split themselves up into small, as I understand it, organizations. For example, a developer isn't responsible for an entire project, say, of 6 buildings, where according to regulations a kindergarten and a school should be built. Instead, they divide themselves into separate LLCs, change things around, and that's how they deceive everyone. And
no matter how much the occupiers try to paint Crimea as beautiful and full of promise, even Russians who were lured by the climate and seaside life are fleeing the peninsula. Only 2 out of 10 stay Russian realtors complain.
Statistics show that 8 people, they bought property, they moved their whole family here. But they will leave and go back or move somewhere else. They won't stay here.
The thing is, prices in Crimea are at least 3 times higher than in mainland Russia. There's a shortage of goods to choose from, and delivery is even worse. Since the arrival of the Russian world on Ukrainian land, it's become impossible to even get medical treatment in Crimea. Even pills made in Russia don't help.
there are no foreign medicines, and Russian medicines, of course, ours. Our domestically produced ones are, of course, far behind the foreign ones. There's still a lot to learn. There was so much time to adopt the experience of making car oil. Ours isn't very good either, apparently. And the medicines are very weak. They either don't help at all or they have a ton of side effects. We just ran into it, bam, and there are no medicines. Oh, it's just awful. I hope that the presidents will meet soon and sign something. We need to establish some kind of formal truce in order to ensure that all these supplies to us can finally begin to resume once more.
And most importantly, it's impossible to live in occupied Crimea because prices are high and salaries are tiny. There are only two categories of people who can do well on the peninsula: the military and law enforcement.
We lived in Crimea for 4 years and now we're going back home. Let me put it this way. If you have a stash of money, you can come while your child is in kindergarten or, say, elementary school. There are no prospects or opportunities here and the prices are just suffocating.
As a result, we lived in Yevpatoria for almost 5 months but had to go back to the Urals. The main reason was the lack of decent earnings. Back home, I was making over 70,000 a month, but in the new place, I couldn't get more than 35,000 for the same work.
Starting a business in Crimea is not the best idea. There aren't a huge number of clients and the corruption is off the charts. Even seasoned entrepreneurs who had survived on the peninsula for decades were brought to tears by the actions of the occupation authorities.
Did we really vote for Russia just so Russia would leave us without a means to live? Why is the administration undermining our Russia with its actions, making people feel hurt now? Ukraine provided jobs, but under Russia, we've been left without work. The actions they're taking, they are discrediting Russia itself. That's the issue. So 300 people are left in their old age. People are between 40 and 60 years old. Where are we supposed to go? Who will hire us at this age?
If there's anything in abundance in Crimea, it's propaganda. Teenagers who are fleeing Crimea through third countries. To Ukraine, they tell how Russians brainwash people, starting with children.
Now it's complete militarism there. If before their propaganda was more or less mild, now it's just outright savagery. To the point where children are literally taught to kill, taught to sympathize with the killer, not the victim. Moreover, I wouldn't even say they're taught to feel sympathy at all. I don't think these people even know what sympathy is, what empathy is. They don't understand anything about that. Because in reality, children are being taught to be tough and nothing else. They will go out and kill, and they will justify killings, and they will do exactly the same things that the older generations are doing now. In fact, they're raising a kind of camp of killers, a huge number of such people.
Total control, surveillance. For 11 years now, the indigenous Crimeans have been living on the peninsula as if they're in a prison camp. Repressions in Crimea intensified after the full-scale invasion of mainland Ukraine by the Russians and its occupation, and its rule. New waves come with every successful operation by the defense forces. There is almost no room left for news or daily life in Crimean news public pages. Some ads here and there, and just a vast sea. Reports of detentions for so-called preparations for terrorist attacks and collaboration with Ukrainian.
These various national intelligence services are working together now.